The sun was sinking low, casting long shadows across the dusty fields where the farmer worked alone. It was a time when trust was as rare as rain in the desert, and every stranger was met with wary eyes and tightened grips on rifle stocks. Yet, on that quiet evening, a weary traveler appeared at the edge of the farmer's land, cloaked in tattered clothes, face drawn with hardship, and eyes carrying stories the wind had forgotten. Without hesitation, the farmer stepped forward, offering more than just food. He offered a hand in a world that often took instead of gave. No one in the nearby town saw the stranger come, nor the quiet meal shared beneath the sprawling oak. The farmer said little, but his actions spoke volumes. He handed over bread, meat, and a cup of water as if the man were family, not a passing shadow. That night, the flickering lantern light carried the unspoken promise of kindness that was quickly becoming lost in a land carved by fear and survival. It was a moment too simple to catch attention, but a moment powerful enough to change everything. Days passed. The traveler disappeared as quietly as he arrived, swallowed by the horizon and the stories of the plains. The farmer returned to his routine, tending the fields, mending fences, speaking mostly to the wind. But soon, a new sound stirred the valley, the rhythmic beat of drums, the rustle of silken banners, the steady clip of hooves on dirt roads. What no one expected was that this caravan was no ordinary procession. It was a royal escort, bearing gifts and gratitude that would ripple far beyond the farmer's homestead. The people whispered and watched as the caravan grew closer, its colors vibrant against the dust, its riders proud and poised. They wondered, who had the farmer helped? What debt had been repaid with such grandeur? And most importantly, what had this humble man done to summon a kingdom's respect to his doorstep? In that moment, the old tales of honor, fate, and generosity swirled like the prairie winds, reminding everyone that sometimes, even the smallest act can summon the grandest response. What followed was not just an exchange of gifts, but a meeting of worlds. The farmer, the stranger, and the royal caravan each carried their own stories, woven with sacrifice, courage, and an unyielding spirit. And as the sun dipped below the hills, it painted a promise across the sky, that in the West, true kindness never goes unnoticed. It always finds its way home. The stranger had arrived on a late afternoon, weary and worn from the endless trails that stretched beyond the horizon. His clothes were torn, his boots caked with dust, and his eyes held the weight of countless miles and stories untold. The farmer, whose life had been bound to the rhythm of the seasons and the land, saw not a threat but a man in need. Without hesitation, he set down his tools and prepared a simple meal: bread baked from his own grain, salted meat cured over many moons, and a warm broth simmered with herbs gathered from the hills. The meal was shared under the shade of the farmer's weathered porch, illuminated by the last amber rays of the sun. They spoke little, not out of silence, but out of understanding that words often failed to capture the depth of one's journey. The stranger's gratitude was quiet but profound: a nod, a clasped hand, a glance that said, "I am not alone." And in that moment, the farmer's world expanded beyond the furrows of his field to encompass a bond forged in the humblest of gestures: shared food and shared humanity. News of the stranger's arrival and the farmer's generosity spread slowly through the surrounding settlements. Some dismissed it as a simple act of kindness in a harsh land, while others sensed the weight beneath the surface. They spoke in hushed tones about the traveler's origins, rumors of a distant kingdom in turmoil, of a royal heir fleeing unseen enemies, of a man carrying secrets that could shift the tides of power. Yet none dared question the farmer's decision to open his door to a stranger when suspicion was the currency of survival. Meanwhile, the days turned into nights, and the stranger rested, regaining strength under the farmer's care. Their quiet companionship blossomed into an unspoken alliance, a recognition that in a world carved by hardship, mercy was a rare and powerful force. The farmer learned that this man bore the lineage of kings, hidden beneath the dirt and dust of exile, bearing a future that was yet unwritten but profoundly important. And the stranger learned that sometimes salvation comes not from armies or armies' glory, but from the simple kindness of a stranger's hearth. Then, as if summoned by the very act of compassion, the ground began to tremble, not from the rumble of thunder, but from the steady cadence of hooves and the shimmering colors of a caravan that appeared on the far horizon. This was no ordinary procession. Royal banners fluttered in the wind, trumpets called the air, and riders clad in silks and armor approached with reverence and purpose. The farmer stood on his porch, heart steady, as the past and future converged in a moment few in the West would ever forget. The caravan drew near, their arrival filling the valley with a sense of awe and wonder. The townsfolk gathered along the dusty roads, eyes wide, whispers racing like wildfire. Who were these noble riders? Why did they come bearing gifts for a simple farmer? Their curiosity was laced with skepticism, but beneath it all lay a hope, the hope that even in a land torn by conflict and mistrust, honor could still find a way to be recognized. At the head of the procession rode a man adorned with the regal insignia of his house, a prince exiled yet dignified, his gaze sweeping the land that had sheltered him. He dismounted with a grace that belied the hardships of his journey and approached the farmer with hands open in gratitude and respect. "You saved more than a man," the prince said softly, his voice carrying the weight of kingdoms. "You saved hope itself." The farmer, ever humble, nodded, unwilling to accept glory for a deed done without thought of reward. The gifts presented were symbols of gratitude and alliance, fine silks from distant lands, weapons forged by master smiths, and provisions to aid the farmer and his community through the harsh seasons ahead. But these treasures were more than material offerings. They were tokens of trust, bridges between worlds once divided by fear and misunderstanding. The farmer's simple act had rippled outward, creating waves that reached far beyond the boundaries of his own land. As the sun dipped below the western hills, the farmer and the prince spoke of futures intertwined, of peace forged through courage, of alliances born in kindness, and of a new era where strangers could become friends, and friends could become family. The valley, once silent under the weight of suspicion, now hummed with the promise of possibility. The West was changing, one story at a time. But the farmer knew this moment was not an end, but a beginning. The road ahead was uncertain and fraught with challenges. Yet, in the face of adversity, he had learned that the greatest power lies not in wealth or weapons, but in the generosity of the human spirit, the courage to feed a stranger, to trust the unknown, and to believe that even the smallest act can summon the grandest response. The days following the royal caravan's arrival were filled with an energy unfamiliar to the quiet valley. The farmer, once a solitary figure working beneath the endless sky, found his home transformed into a place of gathering and celebration. Neighbors from surrounding homesteads came to witness the exchange of gifts, to hear stories of distant lands, and to witness a bond forged not by blood or birthright, but by a shared humanity that bridged cultures and histories. The prince, though regal and distant at first, grew fond of the simplicity and resilience of the farmer's life. Together, they walked the fields, spoke of the cycles of the earth, and planned ways to protect the land that had sheltered the stranger in his time of need. The farmer taught the prince the art of patience, how the land rewards steady hands and humble hearts more than swift swords and bold declarations. In turn, the prince shared tales of his people's traditions, their struggles, and their hopes for peace beyond the borders of their kingdoms. Amid this exchange, the farmer's community began to shift. Old prejudices softened as stories of kindness and courage replaced suspicion and fear. Children who once viewed outsiders with wide eyes now learned songs in foreign tongues and tasted foods seasoned with spices from distant markets. Markets that had once been silent were now vibrant crossroads where goods and ideas traveled freely, carried by the winds of change and the hearts of those willing to embrace it. Yet, beneath the celebrations and new alliances, challenges loomed. Not all viewed this union with goodwill. Rival factions, threatened by the prince's return and the farmer's rising influence, plotted in shadows. They whispered of betrayal, of old wounds reopened, and of a future marred by conflict. But the farmer and the prince, bound by respect and shared purpose, faced these threats with quiet resolve, knowing that true strength is forged not in the heat of battle, but in the unyielding commitment to peace. And so, life in the valley carried on, a tapestry woven from threads of courage, trust, and hope. The farmer's simple act of sharing food had blossomed into a story that would be told for generations, a story reminding all who heard it that even in the harshest landscapes, the smallest kindness can ignite a fire bright enough to light the way forward. Months turned to seasons, and seasons into years. The prince's presence brought new prosperity and opportunities, yet the farmer remained the steadfast heart of the valley. He was the quiet strength beneath the flourish of royalty, the unspoken pillar that held communities together when times grew tough. His hands, weathered from years tilling the soil, continued to sow seeds, not just of crops, but of unity and understanding among people once divided. In the evenings, as twilight stretched across the plains, the farmer and the prince would sit beneath the sprawling branches of the old oak tree, the very spot where they first shared that meal with the weary traveler. There, they reflected on the journey that had brought them together, marveling at how a simple act of generosity had changed the course of their lives and the destiny of their people. They spoke little, for words often fell short of capturing the depth of their bond, but their silence was filled with respect and a shared vision for a peaceful future. The community, inspired by their leader's example, embraced change with open hearts. They built schools where children learned languages and histories that bridged cultures. They held festivals celebrating their diverse heritages, weaving traditions into a new, shared identity. Old grudges faded like morning mist, replaced by friendships forged in cooperation and mutual respect. The valley had become more than a place on a map. It was a living testament to the power of kindness and courage. Yet, the farmer never sought recognition for his role in this transformation. He remained humble, tending his land with the same quiet devotion that had first drawn the traveler to his door. His legacy was etched not in monuments or titles, but in the flourishing fields, the laughter of children, and the peaceful coexistence of neighbors who had once been strangers. It was a legacy born of a simple truth, that true greatness comes not from what we take, but from what we give. And as the sun set on another day in the valley, casting golden hues across the land, the farmer looked out over the fields with a heart full of quiet pride. In the vast expanse of the West, where stories of hardship and survival often overshadow those of hope, his story stood as a beacon, a reminder that even the smallest act of compassion can echo through time, changing lives in ways no one could have imagined. With each passing year, the story of the farmer and the royal caravan grew beyond the valley's borders, carried on the wind like a whispered legend. Travelers from distant towns sought out the humble homestead where a simple meal had sparked an alliance between worlds. They came not just to witness the fields that flourished, but to understand the quiet courage it took to offer kindness when suspicion ruled the land. The farmer welcomed them all with the same grace he had shown the stranger, open hands, open heart, and a spirit unburdened by pride. The prince, now settled as a leader among his people, often spoke of that fateful evening under the oak tree. He told his council that the true strength of his reign was not in armies or riches, but in the generosity of one man who gave without expecting anything in return. That lesson shaped treaties, forged friendships, and helped bring peace to lands long torn by conflict. In that, the farmer's humble act became a cornerstone of a new era, proof that even the simplest kindness carries the power to heal fractured worlds. But life in the West is never without hardship. Seasons of drought and harsh winters tested the resilience of the valley's people. Crops failed, herds thinned, and old fears threatened to resurface. Yet, through it all, the farmer and the prince stood as steadfast symbols of hope and unity. Their bond, born from shared trust and compassion, inspired the community to face adversity together, to rebuild, to persevere, and to believe in the promise of brighter days. Around the firelight, stories of that first encounter were told and retold, each telling weaving new meaning into the fabric of their shared history. Children listened wide-eyed, learning that greatness is not measured by power or wealth, but by the courage to act with kindness in a world that often rewards cruelty. Elders nodded knowingly, their own hearts warmed by the reminder that even the coldest nights can be broken by the smallest light. And so, the valley thrived, not just as fertile land, but as a home for dreams nurtured through compassion and bravery. The farmer's choice to share food with a stranger echoed far beyond the fields he tended, becoming a timeless testament to the enduring strength of human kindness in the rugged, unforgiving West. The seasons cycled again, bringing new faces and fresh hope to the valley. Families who had once been wary of outsiders began to open their doors, inspired by the stories of the farmer's generosity and the prince's grace. Markets blossomed with goods from distant places, songs in unfamiliar tongues filled the air, and children of different heritage played together in the fields once divided by fear and misunderstanding. The valley had become a living example of unity born from trust. The farmer, now older and slower in his steps, found solace in the community he helped nurture. His hands, though worn and scarred from decades of labor, still worked the earth with care and reverence. Each seed planted was a promise that the land, like the people, could heal and grow beyond past hardships. His humility never wavered, even as those around him hailed him as a hero whose simple act had reshaped history. The prince, too, remained a frequent visitor, bridging the gap between tradition and change. He brought with him wisdom and guidance, always reminding the people that leadership is a service, not a privilege. Together, they fostered an environment where old customs were honored and new ideas embraced, a delicate balance that allowed peace to flourish where once there had been only suspicion and strife. Despite their accomplishments, both men understood that peace was not a destination, but a journey, one that required continual care, understanding, and courage. They taught the valley's people that the true strength of a community lies not in walls or weapons, but in the bonds forged through empathy and shared purpose. And in doing so, they ensured that the legacy of that first shared meal would endure far beyond their own lifetimes. As twilight descended on the valley, the farmer and the prince would often stand side by side beneath the old oak, reflecting silently on the remarkable path they had traveled together. In their quiet companionship was a powerful truth. Then the vast, wild West, even the smallest acts of kindness can change the course of history, and that those acts, no matter how humble, are the seeds from which peace and hope grow. Time, relentless as the prairie wind, carried the farmer into his later years, yet his spirit remained unyielding. His legacy had blossomed beyond the soil he tilled, rooted deeply in the hearts of those he touched. The valley's people revered him not for grand gestures, but for the steady kindness that had bridged two worlds, a gift far rarer than gold or land. In every smile shared between neighbors, every handshake that crossed old divides, his quiet courage lived on. The prince, now a seasoned leader, often credited his survival and success to the farmer's simple act of mercy. Their friendship had become a symbol of unity, a reminder that even amidst uncertainty and unrest, human connection could rewrite destinies. Together, they faced challenges, negotiating peace among wary clans, navigating the politics of expanding territories, but always with the lesson that trust begins with an open hand, not a clenched fist. New generations grew up hearing the story of the farmer who shared his meal and the caravan that answered with honor. They learned that true strength lay not in domination, but in compassion. Children of diverse heritage played beneath the very oak where the farmer once fed a stranger, their laughter a living testament to the harmony born from that night. Schools and gatherings celebrated both their histories, weaving them into a shared tapestry of hope and resilience. Yet, the farmer never sought praise. He continued his quiet labor, content in the knowledge that peace and prosperity were gifts nurtured by many hands. His humble home remained a beacon, welcoming travelers and kin alike. And as dusk settled over the valley, the silhouette of the farmer standing against the fading light became a quiet reminder that the smallest kindness can ripple outward, changing the course of lives, communities, and even kingdoms. In the vast expanse of the West, where survival often meant hard choices and harder hearts, the story of the farmer and the royal caravan endured, a timeless lesson that the greatest power lies in generosity, and that sometimes, sharing a simple meal is enough to open doors to unimaginable futures. Seasons changed once more, and with them came new challenges. Harsh winters and dry summers tested the valley's resolve. Yet, the spirit instilled by the farmer's kindness and the prince's wisdom kept the community united. They faced hardship as one, sharing resources, supporting one another, and holding fast to the bonds that had turned strangers into family. The lessons of generosity and trust became their guiding light through the darkest times. The prince, aware that his people's future depended on more than diplomacy, worked alongside the farmer to establish schools and gathering places. There, young minds learned not only reading and writing, but the histories and languages of both their cultures. These places became crucibles of understanding, where old prejudices melted away beneath the warmth of shared knowledge and friendship. The farmer's role evolved from provider to mentor, teaching new generations that kindness was not weakness, but the cornerstone of strength. He showed them how to read the land, to tend the soil with respect, and to carry the legacy of peace through their actions. His hands, once rough from labor, now guided young ones gently, passing on wisdom born of years and humility. At gatherings beneath the great oak, stories of that night, when a stranger was fed, became lessons etched in memory. Elders recounted how one man's heart could change the fate of many. Children listened, wide-eyed, imagining a world where courage was measured by generosity and power by the willingness to give. The valley thrived, not just in crops and trade, but in spirit and unity. And as twilight painted the sky in hues of amber and rose, the farmer and the prince stood side by side, their silhouettes a testament to the enduring power of a single act. In a land often defined by hardship and conflict, they proved that compassion could sow the seeds of a new dawn, one where peace was not just a dream, but a living, breathing reality for all who called the West home. Years stretched on, and the farmer's story, once a quiet ripple, had grown into a tide that reshaped the entire valley. The community he nurtured was no longer a patchwork of cautious settlers and wary tribes, but a living mosaic of cooperation and respect. Farms flourished side by side with tribal lands. Children of different heritages learned to speak each other's languages, and the old wounds inflicted by fear and prejudice began to heal under the gentle touch of shared purpose. The farmer, now slowed by time, but never by spirit, watched this transformation with quiet satisfaction. He understood that the true harvest was not in the rows of golden wheat or the thickening herds, but in the strength of a people united by kindness, trust, and the courage to see beyond differences. The prince, having returned to his homeland to claim his rightful place, often spoke of the farmer with reverence, telling his court how a simple act of sharing bread had sown peace where swords might have sown destruction. His kingdom flourished under a new era of diplomacy and understanding, inspired by the bond forged in a humble valley far from the centers of power. Letters and envoys traveled frequently between the lands, carrying gifts and messages that reminded both peoples of the night a stranger was welcomed with open hands, changing history not with war, but with generosity. Back in the valley, the farmer's legacy was carried forward by those who had learned from his example. Schools taught children the value of empathy alongside reading and arithmetic, while elders passed down stories that reminded the community of its roots. The great oak tree beneath which the farmer and prince once shared their meal became a symbol of hope and unity, a place where families gathered to celebrate the seasons, honor their ancestors, and renew their commitment to peace. It stood as a living monument to the idea that even the smallest kindness could grow into something as mighty and enduring as the tree's ancient limbs. But the farmer never sought to claim glory for these changes. He remained humble, tending his fields with the same steady hands, greeting neighbors with quiet smiles, and finding contentment in the knowledge that his simple choice had sparked a ripple that became a wave. His story was not one of grand gestures or loud proclamations, but of steadfast kindness, the kind that moves silently through time, reshaping hearts and shaping futures. And as he walked among the fields bathed in the golden light of dusk, he carried a profound truth, that true strength lies not in might, but in mercy. In the vast expanse of the West, where legends are often forged in the heat of battle, the farmer's tale endures as a testament to a different kind of heroism. The courage to feed a stranger, to trust without question, and to believe that even in a harsh and unforgiving land, the simple act of sharing food can summon the most extraordinary gifts of all. The final chapters of this tale unfold beneath the wide, endless sky where the farmer spent his life, a sky that witnessed the quiet revolution born from one shared meal. The valley had become a sanctuary, a place where the past scars were softened by present-day kindness, and where future generations would grow up knowing that peace is something nurtured through care and connection. The farmer's fields, once solitary and silent, now echoed with the laughter of children from every walk of life, their footsteps a rhythmic heartbeat of a community healed. As the farmer aged, he found joy not only in the fruit of his labor, but in the company of those who had once been strangers. Friends from neighboring tribes and settlers' families gathered often, sharing stories, songs, and meals beneath the sprawling oak, the very place where the journey had begun. These gatherings, simple and unassuming, became celebrations of unity and resilience, reminding everyone present that even the smallest acts could ripple outward, touching lives in ways unimaginable. The prince's visits became less frequent, but no less meaningful. Each arrival was met with warmth and respect, a reaffirmation of the bond forged long ago. Together, they reflected on the journey from suspicion to trust, from isolation to community. The prince often remarked that it was the farmer's humility and kindness that had paved the way for peace, a peace that would endure long after their days had passed, carried forward in the hearts and hands of the people they had inspired. When the farmer's time finally came, it was with the quiet dignity of a life well lived. The community mourned, not with grand monuments or loud eulogies, but with a gathering beneath the oak tree, where they shared stories, sang old songs, and planted new seeds, both literal and symbolic, to honor the man whose simple act of generosity had changed everything. His legacy was not bound by stone or paper, but by the living, breathing community that thrived because he had dared to feed a stranger when the world would have turned away. And so, beneath the endless west sky, the story closes not on an ending, but on a promise that in a land where survival often meant solitude and suspicion, one man's kindness created a legacy that would echo through generations, reminding us all that the power to change the world lies within the simplest acts of compassion and trust. This story reminds us that even in the harshest, most unforgiving places, humanity's greatest strength often lies not in weapons or power, but in the simple, courageous act of offering kindness to a stranger. The farmer, who shared his food without hesitation, didn't just save a man in need. He opened a door to peace, trust, and unexpected alliances. His quiet generosity sent ripples that forever changed the course of a valley, a kingdom, and countless lives. It is a powerful reminder that sometimes the smallest gestures have the largest impact. Throughout this tale, we see that true courage is not always loud or dramatic. It is found in the willingness to extend a hand without knowing the return, to trust without seeing the outcome, and to give without expecting anything back. The farmer's story challenges us to reconsider what it means to be strong, teaching that compassion can build bridges where walls once stood. His legacy is a beacon, shining brightly across time, urging us all to act with heart in a world too often ruled by fear. As the sun sets on this story, think about the moments in your own life where you can be that farmer, where a simple act of kindness might change the course of someone's day, or even their destiny. It is easy to feel small in a vast world, but the farmer's journey shows us that no act of goodness is ever truly small. Each choice to share, to help, to trust, carries the potential to ignite hope and heal divides. If this story moved you, if it sparked a new understanding or stirred your heart, stay with us for more tales that remind us of the quiet power of humanity. Subscribe to the channel to journey deeper into stories that inspire, challenge, and connect us all. And please, share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell us what part of the story touched you most, or how you've experienced the power of kindness in your own life. Finally, if you know someone who needs to hear that even the simplest kindness can change the world, share this video with them. Because sometimes, one story is all it takes to remind us that compassion is not just an act. It's a legacy we can all leave behind.